Densha de GO!
(1997 and 1998 had seen the launch of Densha de GO in arcades and in homes. From out of nowhere, with a director on his last chance, and developed with minimal managerial oversight, the train sim had taken the arcades by storm and gone on to sell 1 million copies on the PlayStation. Striking while the iron was hot, Taito designed and sold a new form of controller for the home market, the SLPH-00051 Densha de GO controller, or Mascon. Modelled on the traditional two-handle control scheme used in older train models, itself a relic from the days of Steam, it used a vertical axis control for acceleration and a horizontal control for braking. Simplicity, efficiency, and the shift to electronically controlled induction engines meant that the two-handle control scheme's days were numbered, and a one-handle control scheme became commonplace in trains across Japan and the world. Despite being around since the 50s in Japan, one-handled controllers took a long time to become widespread. These days, most trains and trams use this control method. Their operation is exceedingly simple: pull to go, push to stop. There are multiple variations of these one-handled controllers, but the one we're looking at today is the one-handed, one-handled controller, dutifully engineered into a controller by Taito. Released to coincide with the launch of Densha de GO 2 on the PlayStation, the SCPP-20001 brought a modernised control scheme to the series. It is backwards compatible with the original Densha de GO, and following entries in the series would also support it, either natively or through the use of cheat codes. While the two-handle controller was also available for the Nintendo 64, Sega Saturn, Dreamcast and PC, this would remain a PlayStation exclusive, except for the one licensed out to Unbalance for the PC games. I wonder if the sales of Densha de GO X on the Saturn made Taito think twice about controllers on other platforms, so they didn't bother making multiple models, or they simply saw the huge PlayStation numbers and opted to focus any hardware releases on that. This makes sense, as we know that the days of ports to non-Sony platforms are coming to an end. The games which released after the debut of the one-handle controller, that's Densha de GO 64, Densha de GO 2 3000 Banzai, were all stuck with the original design, but these systems only had one installment of the series. Had there been a Densha de GO 64 Professional or a Dreamcast equivalent of Densha de GO Nagoya Edition, we may well have seen updated controllers for these games. So how does this one work? Let's take it apart. There are 6 rubber pads hiding 6 screws. Once we've taken these out, we can pop the bottom off, and would you look at that, 2 chunks of metal to give the controller some heft. In total, the one-handle controller weighs a little over 1.1 kilograms. Over half of that is taken up by the base as seen here. Understandable, as once you look at the top half, it's almost empty, just a pivot and 2 printed circuit boards. But this is where things get really interesting. These boards were made by Quickshot. Now, any gamers from back in the day will be delighted to see this, as Quickshot were prolific back in the 8 and 16-bit days. They made controllers for every system going: Amstrad, Spectrum, C64, Atari, NES, Master System, Mega Drive, SNES, PC, everything. If you had a fairly decent third-party controller in the 80s and early 90s, chances are it was a Quickshot. Could it be that the Densha de GO one-handle controller was made by the same people as the incredible Maverick 2 for the NES? A controller I used daily back in the day? Possibly. The history of Quickshot/Spectravision deserves its own lengthy video, but accurate information is a bit sparse. By the late 90s, the makers of Quickshot joysticks had been bought out, and the business taken from the US to Hong Kong. It's feasible that with their history with making controllers, Bondwell Global, as it was known at this point, were perfectly poised to mass produce these controllers. Can't say for sure, but it was a lovely blast of nostalgia to see that name printed on both PCBs. Mechanically, it is similar to the first controller in that the lever rotates a set of connectors along a PCB. But on that controller, each copper pad was connected to an IC that would relay that information to a microcontroller. This time around, it's a much more basic affair, with the pads connected to a series of resistors. Looking at the main PCB, we can see the lines in from the control lever PCB are labelled VCC, B, M and GND. VCC and GND are voltage and ground, and I presume B and M are brake and master controller. It makes sense as the voltage from the PlayStation is passed through various resistors, and the return voltage is what tells the microcontroller on the main circuit board at what notch the lever rests. Genius! So, for example, if we pass through 3 volts and got 1.8 volts back, the microcontroller takes that into a key configuration. Checking resistance with a multimeter confirmed my suspicions, with each successive pad increasing or decreasing the amount of resistance. Awesome. Let's run it through the PlayStation pad tester to see what inputs are being registered. If you watched the other controller video, you might recall that the master controller gave inputs based on the D-pad and face buttons, while the brake lever returned the shoulder buttons. Not so for the one handle controller, which returns a wild assortment of inputs for each notch on the handle. Once again, up and down on the D-pad are always pressed. This lets the software know that a Densha de GO controller is being used, as opposing D-pad buttons could not be pressed in unison on the PlayStation controller. Cleverly, this new controller is a composite of the 2 levers in the original control scheme. The neutral setting on the original controller had all 4 D-pad buttons on the master controller, and L2, R1 and R2 on the brake dial. The one handle controller presents this same group of inputs to the PlayStation. Whenever the player is accelerating, the shoulder buttons are at a constant, the same as neutral. Conversely, when the player is braking, the D-pads are all the same, set to 0, and the shoulder buttons indicate the notch on the controller. This is how the controller is backwards compatible. The inputs are the same as far as the software is concerned. While the first controller has more possible combinations of inputs due to the 2 levers, meaning you could be accelerating and braking at the same time, these are entirely unnecessary as driving a train has 3 phases: acceleration, coasting and braking. Any combination of master controller and brake lever is the same as braking in-game, and a waste of time. Once again, there are 3 face buttons on the controller. A, B, C operate the menus, and C is the horn in-game. These are also operated by pushing a silicon cup which bridges a circuit and registers an input. Amazing. Who would have thought there'd be this much going on inside a 25-year-old controller? I look forward to seeing other mechanical marvels in the upcoming controllers. How do we rate this one? Does it even matter? We're mostly comparing apples to oranges. If you want a traditional control scheme, use the original Mascon. If you want something a bit easier, more up-to-date, give this one a try. I like the heft of this one though. One of my criticisms of the original Mascon was that it was really light, and heavy lever use could move the entire controller. This is a sturdier feeling controller, weighed down and secure on your lap or table. The mechanism has a good ratchet feeling using the same mechanism seen on the old controller. A bent strip of metal with a notch in the middle that catches between cogs on the pivot. Over time this strip can weaken, so once again you can give it a bend outwards and also bend the spring on the opposite side to create more resistance. It's very nice to use, but after using the original Mascon, that's just what I'm used to. By nature, this is a bit harder to use accurately. The brake notches are pretty close together, but I think that's just splitting hairs. The position is relayed on screen anyway. Speaking of, don't forget to set the control scheme in the options, go to options and controller layout and make sure you select one handle. If you have a controller that is misbehaving on certain lever positions, there's a very good chance that there is a problem with a resistor. Fortunately, they are very cheap and fairly easy to solder in place. Before doing that though, just give the copper pads on the PCB a rub with isopropyl alcohol, then a rub with some contact grease. This can often clear up any misconnections before the need to break out the soldering iron. Right, I think that will just about do us for this episode. Thank you for watching. As always, I'll be back with Densha de GO Professional, the gift that keeps on giving. Until then, take care, and I'll see you at the next station stop.